There is an island on the planet that shouldn't exist. And yet there it is, in the middle of the Atlantic, where two continents pull in opposite directions. The North American plate on one side and the Eurasian plate on the other. They drift apart by a few inches every year, and into that open wound, magma rises, cools, and builds land. And so the island keeps growing even today, literally beneath the feet of those who live there. This is Iceland, a place where frozen ground steams, water boils without fire, and waterfalls plunge from dizzying heights. A land with dozens of volcanoes still active underground, but also one of the youngest on the planet. You might imagine it like this: black, scorched, ruled by fire. But no, on the surface, much of the island is white. About a tenth of the territory is covered by glaciers. Among them, the Vatnajökull, which is the largest in Europe by volume of ice. And part of this ice formed thousands of years ago, even before a single pyramid rose in Egypt. Fire below and ice above. It's an island that burns and freezes in the very same instant, and that's exactly why it keeps existing. The light here behaves strangely too. In summer, in the north of the island, the sun barely sets for months. In winter, the opposite happens, with the darkness taking over. And then there are the people. On a little more than 100,000 square kilometers, or about 40,000 square miles, live around 390,000 people, and nearly all of them along the coast. It's one of the lowest population densities in the world. Even the sheep here outnumber the inhabitants 2 to 1. You meet them everywhere, free. Even in the interior, they're where people never reach. And right within this land, in all that open space, something is missing from the roll call. And the trees? Here comes perhaps the most surprising detail. Iceland today is almost without forests. But it wasn't always like this. When the first Viking settlers arrived more than 1,000 years ago, much of the island was covered in woods. Within a few centuries, nearly all of them were cut down. And today, more than 99% of the original forests are gone. What remains is a bare land, open, with almost no one, but inhabited for those who believe by someone else too. They call them Huldufolk, the hidden people, and a sizable portion of the population won't bring themselves to say they don't exist. They're a kind of elf, humanoid creatures who, according to folklore, would live hidden among the rocks and the hills. The real inhabitants, though, the ones of flesh and blood, have gathered almost all in a single spot. And that spot is a city. Reykjavík. This is the northernmost capital in the world, and yet it looks nothing like a capital. We find low houses of sheet metal, painted red, blue, or acid green, squeezed between the sea and the hill. No imposing palaces, no crowds. It feels more like a big village facing the water. Above everything rises the Hallgrímskirkja, the great church of the city. "73 meters, or about 240 feet of concrete that imitate cooled lava, column after column. From its tower, the city stretches out whole, and beyond it begins the ocean. And right on the seafront rests a ship that will never sail, the Sun Voyager. It looks like a Viking ship, but it isn't. It's a hull of polished steel, and people walk past it at sunset when the metal catches the light. And that same light, cold and sharp on the steel, just outside the city, settles on the water. Blue Lagoon. In the middle of a field of black lava, the water is a milky blue that doesn't exist in nature. It comes out at nearly 40 degrees Celsius, or about 104 Fahrenheit, and steams in the freezing air. Whoever steps in floats in a warm milk, surrounded by rock. It looks like an ancient spring, but it isn't. This water is the runoff of a geothermal plant, pumped from the bowels of the earth to make electricity, and then thrown away. It's a waste product then. And the waste became one of the most expensive baths in the world. The steam erases the outlines, and for a moment, you can no longer tell where the land starts again. But this warmth is only a whisper. Beneath this same peninsula, a few kilometers or a couple of miles away, something far more violent has awakened after hundreds of years. Fagradalsfjall. For nearly 8 centuries, this land stayed silent. Then in 2021, a fissure opened in the empty valley. From there, the lava began to rise. Slow, orange, in fountains that fell back on themselves. It wasn't a disaster. On the contrary, it was a spectacle. The crack was far from any town, and so thousands of people walked all the way up there to watch the rock turn liquid. They called it the tourist eruption. The land here opened for a very precise reason. Because two plates of the planet, the American and the Eurasian, drift apart constantly. It's the same wound that runs across the entire island. Farther east, though, the same wound no longer burns, but you walk on its floor. Golden Circle. Three places close together, that together tell the whole island. The first is a valley where the earth tore itself in two. Þingvellir. You descend on foot into the Almannagjá, which is a gorge between two continents. There's the American wall on one side, the Eurasian one on the other, and in between a path. Here, since the year 930, free men gathered to make the laws and to declare the outlaws. It was the oldest parliament in the world, and it had no roof. Only rock and sky. A little beyond, there's a spring that steams. It's Geysir, and it gave its name to all the geysers of the earth. Today it stays silent almost always. But beside it, its brother Strucker swells, holds back, and every few minutes explodes. A column of boiling water that rises 20 meters, or about 65 feet, and then falls back on itself. The last place instead is Gullfoss, also called the Golden Waterfall. A wide river that plunges in two majestic drops into a canyon and lifts a mist that gives life to rainbows. But there's a waterfall farther south that doesn't merely let itself be watched. It lets itself be walked through. Seljalandsfoss. It falls thin and sharp from 60 meters, or about 200 feet, detached from the wall. It's famous because behind its curtain of water, there's a cave. A path passes through it, and for a few meters you walk right there, behind the waterfall, with the stream flowing before your eyes. From that spot, the world changes. The light shatters, the landscape blurs, and the roar covers everything. For a few seconds, you're inside the waterfall and outside everything else. The ancient sagas are full of bandits who live like this, holed up behind the waterfalls to vanish from the law. A little farther east, along the same coast, there's another waterfall. And she too hides something, but not behind the water, below it. Skógafoss. A wall of water 25 meters wide, or about 82 feet. From up there, it plunges straight down without a hesitation into a cloud of spray that never settles. The legend tells of a chest of gold that the Viking Thrasi supposedly buried right under the waterfall. For years, people swore they saw a ring-shaped handle glinting beneath the water. A staircase of 600 steps climbs alongside the drop, all the way to the edge. The name instead means woods, recalling an island once covered in trees. Today that forest is gone, and the bare land slopes down to the sea. Vík. It's the southernmost village of Iceland, and also one of the smallest. There are few houses gathered between the sea and the mountain, dominated by a little white church atop the hill. They say that if the volcano under the glacier woke up, it would be the only building to survive. Lower down beyond the village, there's the sea. Here, the sand is black as coal, glossy, and the sea comes in with long waves that have dragged away more than one curious soul. The sign on the beach says it clearly, never turn your back on the water. Above the sand rises a wall of basalt. Hexagonal column, regular, where the puffins nest. And offshore, planted in the ocean, 3 dark spires. They're the sea stacks of Reynis Drangar. Folklore says they were trolls, and they were dragging a ship toward shore, in the dark. Then the dawn caught them, and the light turned them to stone in an instant. They've been there ever since, frozen halfway through their work. But not all the rock in this land was born from fire or from trolls. Not far off, in the interior, there's one carved by water, drop by drop over millennia. Fjaðrárgljúfur. A narrow gorge, almost 100 meters, or about 330 feet deep, winding between walls green with moss. On the bottom flows little water, a faint thread of meltwater. And yet it was this, slowly over thousands of years, that carved all of it. Seen from above, it looks like a cut in the landscape, with the walls covered in grass. After a music video was shot here, an enormous crowd arrived, and too many feet ruined it. In fact, they had to close this place for months. If here the earth was incised slowly by water, not far off there's a wound opened by fire in a single blow. Much larger and much more recent. Laki. In 1783, the earth here opened. Not from a single volcano, but along a fissure of 27 kilometers, or about 17 miles, from which more than 100 mouths gaped open. For 8 months, they vomited lava and gas in one of the largest eruptions that human history remembers. The consequences were terrible. The gas poisoned the grass, the pastures died, and with them, most of the livestock. The famine came, and nearly 1 Icelander in 5 did not survive. Today, all that flow has a name: Eldrown. It's an expanse of black lava, covered by a thick and soft moss, and gray-green to the horizon. Here, silence reigns. It's the landscape of mourning, beautiful and mute. Not far off, the same moss clothes an entire mountain alone in the middle of the dark sand. Mælifell. A perfect cone, solitary, all green in the middle of the black plain of the Mýrdalsandur. A pyramid of grass in a desert of ash. It almost seems placed there by someone. In summer it gleams, and the meltwater rivers flow around it, drawing braids of water on the dark sand. No roads, no bridges. There are only rivers to cross to get all the way here. It's one of those places that exist only for those who accept the effort. Farther on in the same highland, the gray and the black end, and something far more colorful begins. Landmannalaugar. Here, the mountains seem painted. The rhyolite, which is a pale and soft rock, tints the slopes yellow, pink, orange, and green. And between one hill and the next, black and ancient lava still oozes. But this area is famous not only for its colors. Right here, where a cold stream meets the lava field, a natural hot spring gushes out. Above all this looms a mountain, the Brennisteinssalda. The name means wave of sulfur. Its colors, in fact, don't come from plants, but from the sulfurous minerals left by the volcano. And from its slopes still escape puffs of vapor that smell of egg. Close by, the same volcanic rock takes instead a geometric form, as if it had been sculpted. Svartifoss. A waterfall that isn't tall, isn't raging, but is framed by something that astonishes. There's a wall of hexagonal columns of black basalt, thin and regular, that hang from above, like the pipes of an upside-down organ. The lava here cooled slowly, and in doing so split into geometric shapes almost perfect. The dark water falls in the middle of this frame, and precisely for this they call it the Black Waterfall. A few kilometers or a couple of miles from here begins the opposite realm, where everything is white and floats. Jökulsárlón. Here, the ice breaks off from the land and takes the road to the sea. The Vatnajökull is the largest ice cap in Europe, and from one of its tongues, enormous blocks break away that fall into the lagoon of Jökulsárlón. And then they float there, blue and white, waiting to melt forever. Their color is electric blue in certain veins, where the ice is so compressed that it has driven out every bubble of air. These very pieces are over 1,000 years old. They fall into the water today, but they began to form when the Vikings were landing on the island. The blocks usually slide toward the sea, where the ocean breaks them, smooths them, and returns them to the shore. And so they end up on a beach of black sand called the Diamond Beach. There's shards of transparent ice scattered on the black that sparkle in the sun. They range from a few centimeters or a couple of inches to blocks as big as a car. A little farther on, the coast changes its face, and on the same dark sand rises a profile of jagged rock. Vestrahorn. Sharp peaks, dark of ancient rock, that rise straight from the sea without warning. It's the image that every photographer of the island chases, and the reason is at its feet. There's a tidal lagoon, a thin blade of water laid out on the black sand. When the wind calms, it becomes a mirror, and the mountain doubles itself. It appears twice, upright and upside down, in a perfect symmetry. Stokksnes. It's the sandy promontory at the feet of the Vestrahorn. We find low dunes covered with golden grass, black sand beaten by the wind, and those peaks that loom at your back. Here once there was an isolated farm, while today there's an entire Viking village. In reality, they're just little houses of wood and turf, built years ago as a set for a film never made, and then left standing, empty. They feign a distant era, but they've never housed anyone. Here, the set design imitates a past that never existed. Inland, instead, lies a place entirely real, one that for millennia no one was able to see. Stuðlagil. A gorge that until a few years ago didn't exist. In 2009, a dam upstream lowered the level of the Jökulsárlón River, and only then did it emerge. Until then, it stayed hidden under the water. Its walls are made of basalt columns, and they're the most numerous and the most regular on the island. At the bottom flows a water of an intense green blue. And the blue of the water, against the gray of the hexagonal stone, has something unreal about it. Up to here, what gave shape to the stone was always nature. But on this island, there's someone who tried to imitate it, building with concrete what lava does with basalt. The Arctic henge. In the far north, in a remote village beaten by the wind, rises a circle of stone. That seems ancient. In reality, it isn't. There are great arches and blocks arranged in a ring, aligned to the sun and the seasons. It looks like a megalithic monument, but the construction began in 2004, and it's still unfinished. It's a fake inspired not by a real religion, but by a medieval poem where 72 dwarves appear. Each element of the hinge is dedicated to one of them, and to a cardinal point. Here, everything is still, calculated, mute. Not far off, though, the water does exactly the opposite. It plunges with a force that has no equal in all of Europe. Dettifoss. It's the most powerful waterfall in Europe. Not the tallest, the most powerful. A front 100 meters, or about 330 feet, wide of gray water that plunges for 44 meters, or about 144 feet, with a roar heard from far away. The noise is such that you speak with difficulty. The edge literally trembles beneath your feet, and the vapor rises like smoke from a fire. The water is the meltwater of the Great Glacier. It descends along the Jökulsárlón River and here throws itself into the void. This waterfall is the cold face of North Iceland. A little to the west, instead, we find exactly the opposite. The warm face. Lake Mývatn. Around a shallow lake, the earth puts on display all it knows how to do when it boils. This is the thermal heart of the north. In the heat of the subsoil, surfaces everywhere. There's the Fjaðrárgljúfur, which is an almost perfect crater, a kilometer or about half a mile wide. Then there's the Krafla, a volcanic system still active. And beside it, there's the Viti, a crater whose name means hell, filled with a green-blue lake. Farther on, Hverir seems a landscape of another planet. Here, the gray mud bubbles, and the fumaroles hiss sulfur. And finally, there's Dimmu Borgir, which means dark fortresses. It's a vast field of lava formations with bizarre shapes, with pinnacles, arches, towers, and hollow structures of black rock that soar from the ground. So much so that they look, in fact, like ruins of castles. In this place, tradition holds that there's a passage to hell. Not far off, instead, there's a point where the gods were abandoned forever. Dettifoss. A wide horseshoe where a river plunges from 12 meters, or about 40 feet, over ledges of lava, widening into a half moon. It isn't very tall, but its curve is among the most harmonious of the island. The name means waterfall of the gods, and to it is tied a famous story, very probably not truthful. Around the year 1000, when the parliament decided that Iceland would become Christian, it's said that the law speaker Þorgeir, returning home, threw into it the statues of the ancient pagan gods. An important gesture to say that the old world was over. The river that creates the waterfall, though, doesn't end here. Going back up it toward the highlands, its water finds a drop narrower and more fierce. Foss. Secluded in the empty heart of the island and reached by few. The water is white, foamy, and throws itself into an amphitheater of basalt columns very tall and dark. It almost seems to fall inside a cathedral of dark stone. It's the fire and the ice of the island, enclosed in a single glance. The stone born of fire and the water born of ice. Here, nature has drawn something perfect. Elsewhere, on the north coast for instance, it amused itself by doing the opposite. Kvíðserkur. A rock 15 meters, or about 50 feet tall, that has set the imagination to work for centuries. There are those who see in it a dragon drinking, those an elephant dipping its trunk into the sea. The name means white shirt, but it deceives. Here in reality, the rock is dark, and the white comes from the guano of the seabirds that nest there by the thousands. This white color, then, is already a surprise in a land of dark stone. But the true surprise arrives in the western fjords, where the sea bathes something even more unusual. Rauðasandur. A very long beach that changes color with the light and in the tide. Pink, gold, and warm red. On an island made of black sands, these colors seem a mistake. The secret, though, is in the materials, which aren't grains of rock, but crushed shells accumulated over centuries and ground into powder by the sea. With the low tide, the water withdraws, leaving a flat and glistening expanse. Dynjandi. Staying among the western fjord, this is their jewel. A 100 meters, or about 330 feet, of total drop, with the water descending in tiers, narrow at the top and twice as wide at the base. like a bridal veil spread over the rock. Below it, a staircase of lesser waterfalls leads upward. Each one has its own name, all the way up to the Great One, which means the thunderous. Its fan-shaped profile that spreads out as it descends is what makes it impossible to confuse. Farther south, beyond the fjords, the island seems to want to sum itself up on its own. And in a single place, it gathers all the landscapes of this land that until now we've seen scattered a bit everywhere. Snæfellsnes Peninsula. They call it Iceland in miniature. In a few dozen kilometers, or a couple dozen miles, we find glaciers, lava, cliffs, beaches, and fishing villages. High above stands Snæfellsjökull, a volcano covered in ice that has always lived in the ancient sagas. Going down to the sea, you come upon two tiny villages, Arnarstapi and Heddalnar, a few steps from each other. A path of a couple of kilometers, or a little over a mile, joins them, passing where the ancient lava crumbled against the sea. Here the ocean has carved arches, caves, and spires of dark stone, and in summer the walls fill with seabirds that nest and cry without rest. Farther north rises the Kirkjufell, which is the church-shaped mountain. A green cone, steep and almost symmetrical, with a small waterfall at its feet. It's perhaps the most photographed mountain in Iceland, and for many the most elegant. Hraunfossar. This isn't a waterfall. There are almost 1,000. Here, for about a kilometer, or a little over half a mile, the water gushes directly from the edge of a lava field. You can't see where it comes from because the water arrives from far away, hidden. It's rain and melted ice from the Vatnajökull that filters for kilometers inside the porous lava. And then it pours into the river in hundreds of blue rivulets among the green moss. A few steps farther, though, everything changes. At Barnafoss, the river narrows and boils furiously among the rocks. The name means Waterfall of the Children, and an old story tells of two little brothers fallen from a natural arch of stone that spanned the river. The mother, out of grief, supposedly had the arch destroyed so that no one would ever fall there again. This plain of lava through which the water filters had a precise origin. And that origin is still there, not far off. Grábrók Crater. A low crater welcoming, a little more than 170 meters or about 560 feet tall. You climb it in about 10 minutes on a wooden walkway with steps and all. At the top, the gaze falls inside the empty mouth, where once the fire boiled. It's the teaching volcano par excellence. Here the school groups arrive to understand how a crater is made because it's safe, comfortable, and within everyone's reach. But if here you climb upward to look inside an empty mouth, the last stop of our journey does the exact opposite. You go down, with effort, into an abyss. Glymur Waterfall. For nearly 2 centuries, it was the tallest waterfall in Iceland. It plunges into a narrow and deep gorge for almost 200 meters, or about 650 feet, but it doesn't let itself be seen easily. On the contrary, to reach it, you have to sweat. The trail enters a cave, then descends to the river to be crossed on a log, and again climbs steeply along the flank of the canyon, among the ferns. And at last, from above, you see it. A very long thread that pulverizes into spray before it even touches the bottom. Inside a green cleft where the light arrives with difficulty. Here ends our journey in Iceland, an island that keeps growing, made of fire and of ice. A young land, shaped by its volcanoes and its legends. But there's another place on the other side of the world where the fire tells a very different story. There, the volcanoes don't look out over the ice, but over jungles and rice paddies. But this is not part of our journey. A new story awaits us. Thank you for watching.